This is the Microsoft Cloud Show, episode 168. Today, CJ and I are going to cover some of the news from the Microsoft Connect event and also cover some additional news, recorded live November the 23rd, 2016. The Microsoft Cloud Show is sponsored by Rencor. Rencor is a market leader in the code analysis space. Founded and driven by high-profile international SharePoint and Office 365 experts, their main goal is to help any organization using Microsoft's enterprise productivity environments to work more efficiently by providing software that optimizes and secures their collaboration solutions. Rencor's most recognized product, the SharePoint Code Analysis Framework, SPCAF, is the de facto standard tool for verifying the quality, compliance, and governance of SharePoint and Office 365 customizations. If your company is using SharePoint or Office 365 and you're struggling to get your Office 365 and SharePoint customizations under control, check them out at spcaf.com to learn all the ways that SPCAF can help you. Good morning, CJ. How are you?
Pretty sweet. How about you?
I'm struggling, but I'm alive. I'm suffering.
Jet lag, huh?
Yeah. Last week I was in Asia. I did a couple days in Tokyo and then a couple of days in Sydney, and I got home late Sunday night. So I'm on my third day post 25 hours of traveling, and day one wasn't so bad. Yesterday was an absolute beast, and today. Having some trouble today, but...
day one is adrenaline fueled, right? You're okay on day one because you're still, I've got to be awake, and your body is rallying.
Yeah.
But then day 2 and 3, brutal. They say, some doctors have said, it takes 1 day for every hour of time zone that you change for your body to get back to complete normality.
Oh, man, I'm 14 hours off.
There you go.
I don't have time for that.
You got a couple of weeks before you're sleeping right, your circadian rhythm is all back to normal and so forth. So you got a bit to go. I'm not going to listen to those doctors. Yeah, just get yourself jacked up on coffee and stuff like that. I'm sure it'll work out great.
I'm trying, man. I'm trying to feed my way through. I figured that a safe way to do it was to drink lots of coffee throughout the day, and then have a couple beers when it's time to go to bed. That'll help me get to sleep. So just stimulants and depressants.
That sounds like a great set of medicines to me. I'd go for scotch personally, but yeah.
Scotch won't put me to sleep. I can pound a few beers and it'll knock me down, but. It was interesting, man. It's the first time I've been to Japan or Tokyo and Japan, and that is a fascinating place. I cannot wait to go back.
Different world, huh?
It really was. I tell you, I was only there for a very short time. I was there for 3 full days, and 2 days I was in a classroom. It was the first time that I've taught with interpreters, live interpreters. So, when you watch TV and you hear an interpreter speaking like a simultaneous translation, it's tough when you're looking at someone and you're presenting. And you got the little earpiece on, but at the end, when you ask for any questions, and then someone grabs a microphone and they're reading their question out, or they're speaking their question out in Japanese, and you're having to watch them, but you can't listen to what they're saying. You have to focus on what's coming through the earpiece in your ear, and then they stop talking, and the translation's still going. So there's this awkward thing where everyone else is looking at us, and you've got like that 5 to 10 seconds of the awkward stare. I give them the answer, and then they're sitting there and they're listening to the translation. We're staring at each other and just kind of waiting, and all of a sudden they're like, okay, yes, I understand. Thank you. It's so awkward.
It is pretty weird teaching with translators, I got to say. I did it years ago in Korea and felt the exact same way. And yeah, it's super awkward. And after a couple of days, it wasn't too bad. Like, you got used to it, and you got to get a different speaking pace, and you start figuring out, like, as you probably found, right? Like, are the translators keeping up with me? Is this translating correctly? Are people understanding? And you got to get that new baseline that you're not used to.
Yeah. It was it definitely was a challenge, but I tell you, I was absolutely blown away. I did have one day where I walked around the city and everything, and I think I walked 15 miles in one day. I went to the Robot Restaurant, which was, if nobody knows what that is, go to YouTube and look up the Robot Restaurant, and it is basically it's a seizure-inducing experience. It's just, it's absolutely just, it's crazy. But
sounds fun.
The Japanese culture is so warm. I mean, people are incredibly friendly. Everything is so clean. The taxi drivers, everybody's in a suit. They've got white gloves on. Every taxi, I swear, it looks like it just got detailed and I was the first passenger, because the windows were crystal clear, clean. I wish I could get my windows on my cars as clear as those are.
Yeah.
But It was cool. And then I had a flight down to I'll tell you one more quick little thing is I had a flight from Tokyo. I went from Tokyo to Seoul. I think it's Incheon
Airport.
Yeah,
yep.
Thing is massive. Mm-hmm. And then from there down to Sydney, and I totally lucked out. And that Seoul to Sydney flight, I was on an Airbus A380-800, and I got upgraded to first class. Oh my God!
Nice.
It was just. I mean, you finished. The amount of space was incredible, but and there was only 3 people in first class. It was kind of cool, but they gave us a set of pajamas that we could change into to go to sleep. And then when I finished my dinner, I got up to go use the restroom, and the stewardess came over, the flight attendant came over and says, "Are you going to have your rest now?" I was like, "Yes." And she goes, "Okay, well, I'll get your bed ready." And I'm thinking, well, she's going to lean over and push the button that flattens the chair out. No, I came back, and I had about an inch to an inch and a half thick mattress that was on top of the flat bed, and then the duvet they give you. I've been on those lay flats before, but I've never had a mattress put down, and man, that was...
Makes a difference, huh?
Yeah, it was like...
Especially on those, 10-plus hour flights.
Yeah, that was it was an 11-hour flight, and it was... Oh, my God, it was nice. I didn't have that on the Sydney to LAX coming back home, but...
Slumming it, man, slumming it.
Delta business class is nothing like Korean Air first class.
Nice.
Anyway.
And so what are we talking about today?
Yeah, so today we went in the last week. I know you did the episode with Steve Peshka, and the week before that we had our episode with Scott Guthrie, and Scott talked about some of the stuff that they were releasing and talking about at Connect. Specifically, we focused on the container aspect of that. We did publish that show the day after Connect, but a whole lot more stuff came out at Connect that you and I wanted to make sure we covered in the show, because there's a lot of really good stuff here. So I thought that, first we would rattle off some stats that Microsoft shared at Connect, rattle off a little bit of news, and then kind of go into some of the additional news that has come out around like the Google Cloud Platform and some other stuff around Azure that we missed. And some of these bits of news, honestly, that came out at Connect, I completely missed them. I didn't even see them. And I was looking at the stat sheet that came out. So this will be some news for some people. And some of them were, and when we were pulling the show notes together, I was big eyes here. So
yeah, there's a lot of good news.
Yeah. So how about I throw out the some of the stats here that Microsoft shared, and then we'll kind of go back and forth on some of the Connect news.
Sounds good.
So for Connect stats, these are going to be kind of rapid fire. So there are 1 million monthly active users of Visual Studio Code. Awesome little editor. 25,000 developers from 1,700 companies have contributed to the .NET Core since it was open sourced in February.
That's amazing.
Yep.
That one really blows my mind. 25,000 devs? That's pretty cool.
25,000 devs from 1,700 companies. It's really cool. Approximately 1 of every 3 virtual machines on Azure are now Linux VMs. That one we've kind of known about, but I think it used to be like 25%. Now we're up to almost 33%. There are 1.6 million active SQL databases on Azure. There are 120...
That's a lot of Northwind.
AdventureWorks is strong.
That's right.
120,000 new Azure subscriptions per month are getting created.
That one, I actually remember hearing that during the keynote, and I was actually kind of surprised. It feels kind of low to me. I don't know. That's only, what is that, 4,000 a day?
4,000 a day, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why. I was kind of underwhelmed by that. I was like, that's not as many as I thought. I don't know why. I've got nothing to back that up. But
just a gut feeling.
Yeah.
There has been a 35% month-over-month growth over the past year of Microsoft Graph, and there are 47,000 active third-party applications that are built using Microsoft Graph and that are hitting Microsoft Graph with 1 billion API transactions.
Yeah, I reckon I'm 999 million of those. Yep.
Hyperfish is busy.
That's actually a really cool statistic, because it's there's been a bunch of different APIs and they're all sort of coalescing under the graph slowly over time, but it's nice to see there's some traction there. That's good.
Yeah. Now we've also got a bunch of stuff around just some additional news that came out of Connect. So how about we split this up, and I'll do the dev tooling kind of stuff, and then you do the Azure stuff. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
Okay. So first, Microsoft released the Visual Studio 2017 release candidate. That came out at Connect. They also announced a preview version of Visual Studio for the Mac. That one, man, there were numerous leaks and accidental releases of news like the day or two before Connect, but this was one of them. And this looks like the Xamarin Studio editor that Microsoft got from the Xamarin acquisition. A little bit rebranded, still feels a lot like Xamarin Studio, but being able to have full-blown Visual Studio on a Mac. I've installed it. I've created my first project with it. I've opened an existing project. I took a look at it with .NET Core and ASP.NET Core. Wicked cool, man. It's really cool to see that Microsoft has gone in this direction.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's, for the most part, very mobile-centric, right? Because it was from Xamarin Studio. So for building Windows, Mac, or iOS, I should say, and Android apps. But it seems they've done some work around .NET Core, ASP.NET, and things as well. So that's nice to see.
Yeah, and they also did, part of the other Xamarin piece is they also released something called the Visual Studio Mobile Center Preview, which, again, that looks like it came straight from Xamarin, which Xamarin had a way of having all these devices like in the giant farm, and you could go test your app on all these different mobile devices. I think Google's got something like that. I think that AWS has something like that. But Xamarin's always been like the best one of all of them. So that's cool to see. And the last one that I'll throw out there is a Visual Studio Code extension has been added for doing any kind of work that you want to do with SQL Server with updated connectors and tools. So that's a nice update that we have as well for Visual Studio Code.
Yeah, nice. Very nice. Yeah, there was a lot of really good tooling announcements around, for the tools, obviously, like around Visual Studio and so forth. And it was nice to see some of the Xamarin stuff coming into the sort of the Microsoft brand and the integration going on there. So yeah, that was a lot of good stuff.
So how about Azure stuff? What you got on us for the Azure space?
Yeah, there's quite a few good announcements around Azure. First one off the blocks is the general availability of Azure Functions. So this one's pretty close to home because a friend of ours, Jeremy Thake, that some folks on the show will know, was working on this release in the Azure team. So they've gone GA now, which is pretty cool. And we use that for parsing the logs of the Cloud Show. So we did a show a while back on how we did this, but we get blob logs from Azure Blob Storage that we fire into a function and parse them out and put them in a SQL database with some processing applied. And that lets us do our analytics and reporting on show downloads and stuff like that. So nice to see them go GA. This is the whole move about serverless computing and the buzzwords around that stuff. Lambda is the equivalent in AWS, and now Azure has Functions, which is pretty nice. The next one is Azure Bot Service. So this one is pretty interesting because it's really it's an amalgamation of a couple of different things. It's an amalgamation of the bot framework with Azure Functions and some other Azure bits and pieces. So this gives you, I created one in 5 minutes up in Azure. It's pretty sweet. You can go create a bot service, and it gives you an API, a bot framework integration, and a function, Azure Functions, that are called when things come into your bot. So it's really pulling all of the pieces that you need to build a bot together and giving you a simple way to create one in Azure, which is nice. Mm-hmm. Azure App Service on Linux preview now with containers and ASP.NET Core support. We talked about that a little bit with Scott Goo. Of course, this one is pretty sweet, and I need to learn more about it from the Connect recordings to dive into it in more detail and go give this a shot. But again, yeah, super exciting and really interesting. We need to dive into that a bunch more, I think. Yeah, Azure N-Series GA. So more compute goodness. I think these guys are what you would use if you're doing serious number crunching, big machine learning stuff, right? That's the idea behind these.
So these are the ones that have been in preview since August of 2016. And these are the ones that have the latest cutting edge GPUs from Nvidia that allow you to do, like you said, a lot of serious number crunching. But I mean, there are also things that I know that I've tried them out when I do like any of the video based stuff. So this new venture that I'm doing with doing the video training again, I tried, I recorded a couple modules or a couple clips, rendered them on my MacBook Pro, see how fast they took. I did everything with Adobe Creative Cloud and Premiere and Media Encoder, so it was really easy I get 2 licenses to that. So I have one on my Mac, and then I went and spun up one of these N-Series VMs and installed my other Creative Cloud license up there, uploaded the project, and I let it go through and do the rendering. And it's a hell of a lot faster, man. It can.
Is that right?
Yeah. I mean,
wow.
Especially when you can go through and set up things with like Media Encoder as a batch and say, once the thing is done, then shut the machine down. Now, granted, it shut it down, but it doesn't deallocate it. So I got to figure out something else, how I can like do a call external to, call back itself and say deallocate it with the REST API. But it was definitely a heck of a lot faster, and it's a nice option instead of having to rendering of a video takes a significant amount of time, and it's all GPU related stuff. It's all, I mean, if you can use the CUDA stack that Nvidia has, stuff goes faster. So I think I may be taking advantage of these N-series VMs as well.
Very cool. Very nice. A couple of other shorter ones. DocDB gets a new emulator for offline mode for Windows only at this point. This is kind of interesting because if you're trying to develop with DocumentDB, in the past you've had to use the production service in the cloud in Azure and go create yourself a development copy of DocDB. But now they've got an emulator for offline and local, so you can develop against it locally without having to spin up a DocDB in Azure. And then the final one, Azure Data Lake Analytics and Store GA with Visual Studio Code tooling and VS Coding. So, again, more services coming out of preview into GA and some nice tooling to go along with it, so you can connect up and go issue queries, I'm assuming. I haven't tried that extension out yet.
Well, cool. A lot of news here from the Connect conference, but we got some more news we want to share. But before we do that, why don't we take a quick break and have a quick word from one of our sponsors. The Microsoft Cloud Show is sponsored by ShareGate. ShareGate makes it easier for organizations to adopt and use the latest Microsoft productivity tools, helping millions of users be happier and more productive at work. ShareGate is trusted by over 10,000 IT admins from over 110 countries to manage, migrate, and secure their SharePoint and Office 365 environments. ShareGate is recognized as the must-have tool for day-to-day administration of on-premises, cloud, and hybrid environments. Interested in learning more? Check them out on ShareGate.com to learn how ShareGate can make you more productive. All right. So, CJ, we got a bunch of other news that came out. I want to grab one of them real quick here because I think that it relates to a lot of the news that we just talked about a minute ago about the N-series VMs that Azure has. They're not the only ones on the block here with these GPU available VMs. We had AWS has been offering this for a little while. Google came out and said that they now have GPUs as well available for the Google Cloud Platform. They announced that they were going to have some stuff. They were going to have GPUs available for the compute engine and the cloud machine learning users as well. But this is now going to allow us to do it for VMs as well. So the scenarios that they listed out and they apply as well to the AWS and the Azure ones are complex medical analysis, financial calculations, seismic, subsurface exploration, machine learning, video rendering. Hey, as I like that. Transcoding and scientific simulators. I actually want to try the whole rendering the videos between AWS and Azure and Google and see which ones give me the best performance. But there are 3 different types of machines that you can use or cards that you can use. There's an AMD FirePro S9300X2. There is an Nvidia Tesla P100 and an Nvidia Tesla K80S. So those are the 3 different cards that they have that you can get access to.
Wait a second, you got to plug your car into the cloud to render a video?
There you go, baby.
I knew that was coming.
Of course it's coming. I just got to make sure it's charged up. You'll be able to attach up to 3 GPU dies to any non-shared core machine, whether you're using the high instance with 3 terabytes of super fast local SSD or a custom 28 virtual CPU machine with 128 gigs of RAM. So talk about some badass boxes, man. You could sit there and something tells me I can render out these videos a bit faster than my 3-year-old MacBook Pro here.
You certainly hope so, yeah. There's a nice piece of news that went along with this actually at Connect that we should yap about, which is the partnership between Microsoft and OpenAI that was announced. OpenAI is a not-for-profit that was started by our mate, Elon Musk, and Sam Altman, who is the co-founder of Y Combinator. And so anyway, they started OpenAI, which is all about AI research. They announced that they are moving to Azure for their compute. And it obviously goes hand in hand with, some of these announcements about GPU support, different types of machines and so forth, so that they can do deep learning research and things like that, and AI research. And they've chose the Microsoft Cloud. It's a pretty sweet win for Azure, if you ask me.
I agree. It's a bit of a surprise to me. I'm sure, they say that they did. Azure gave them a price cut as well for switching over to them compared.
Oh,
because I'm sure that, AWS was, they were going to try and play off the AWS and the Google move as well. But I mean, With the work that Google especially has been doing over the last year, trying to go for the big wins, getting people like Spotify to jump over to the Google Cloud Platform, this is a pretty impressive win for Azure to have this on top of to have the OpenAI project being able to leverage best that Azure has to offer. So it's a big win for them. It's cool to see. And I mean, seeing Sam Altman up there and seeing Elon Musk is involved in this as well. It's a lot of good news for Azure on this one.
Yeah, definitely. It looks like they're the ones, they're an early adopter of those N-series new machines that are coming out in December. So that's pretty sweet.
It's very sweet. It's very sweet. And another one that we have, a jump back over as well, back to the Google story as well, is that there's a blog. I actually took notice of this blog in the last few weeks. I've sent you a couple of links too, but it's a site called the HFT Guy, which HFT stands for high frequency trading. If you're not familiar with what that is, but if you've seen like flash crashes over on the United States stock exchanges, what these are, there's a fascinating book called Flash Boys by Michael Lewis, I think. The whole thing about this is that they use technology to watch what's going on in the stock market and then start to make really, really fast transactions and with stocks and then turn right around and sell them right away when you could just make a fraction of a penny of profit. But they're doing it at mass scale. So it's really, really interesting to watch how this stuff works. This guy's got a blog post. He's written a couple of things about containers as well, but he did a pretty in-depth breakdown that he published on November the 18th titled "The Google Cloud is 50% cheaper than AWS." And he runs through looking at a lot of different things, a lot of different aspects on how the Google Cloud Platform is less expensive and is more affordable than what you get with AWS. And he made some comments that I think they're pretty appropriate. I've seen more and more people talk about this with respect to AWS, but AWS was kind of seen as like first generation cloud. And what we're seeing from Azure and really more recently from Google as well is that we're seeing that we're now at like the second generation cloud where they're learning from the experiences published from AWS and what customers are saying, and they're doing stuff in a little bit different way. I think, there's a little bit of stuff in there comparing it to Azure as well. Not too much in terms of the price, mostly around the performance side. One thing that I do see, and I think that this will really pick up once we get these the improvements that Microsoft is making to the networking stack over on Azure. Some of the stuff they talked about at Ignite recently. But the Google Cloud Platform really has some incredible performance when it comes down to like file I/O between their storage blobs and such and page blobs and such. So he does a really good job of kind of breaking it down where you get more performance out of this and then also turning around and talking about the cost benefit as well. One thing he did call out here, and I've always thought this as well, but I kind of felt like I was missing the boat. AWS has this concept of reserved instance to where you can save a bunch of money apparently if you commit to buying this VM and running it for the entire year. So instead of having like kind of spot instance running, you can say, I'll reserve this VM and I'll use it all year. To me, it's always seemed kind of a ridiculous proposition to make a bet and saying, I look at you, hey, Hyperfish, you know the stuff that you're doing right now? Yeah. Can you guarantee that you're going to be doing the exact same thing for the next 12 months? Financially back that. And if you don't, well, sorry, you've already agreed to pay for it. So you got to pay for it for the next year.
Yeah, I get it for systems that have got a baseline of infrastructure requirements that don't change, and then you want those as cheap as possible. You get a deal on prepaying in advance. I can see that. Azure kind of have a similar offering, or at least used to. I don't know if they do right now or anymore, where you used to be able to prepay for 6 or 12 months and you got a discount. So they have a similar kind of thing. They don't call it reserved instances, but you basically prepay and get a discount. That would be useful for folks that have a baseline of infrastructure that they're going to need.
Yeah, I think for the Azure side, it's a financial commitment. Where on the AWS side, it's a financial commitment, but it's a commitment to a specific size VM so that they can allocate that for you. And that's the part to me that's kind of like,
Gotcha.
I get that. Like with you guys, you've built stuff to run in the cloud. So can you guarantee over the next year you're not going to switch from Azure to AWS or Azure to Google? I mean, that's an easier bet to make. But saying the VMs that you're running all of your containers on today, you're going to use those exact same containers for the next 12 months, or you're going to use the exact same VMs for the next 12 months.
Yeah, probably not.
That's a little bit of a steeper demand, I think, but
yeah, for sure.
Different groups.
I wish this guy had done a Azure comparison in this article, and it kind of motivated me to go, take his measurements and then go look at the same numbers in Azure and put it side by side and see where Azure stacks up.
Did you get anything?
I haven't done
it's
it
just
yet.
motivating to do it.
Yeah, it's motivating, but it got to the bottom of my 1,000-item long to-do list.
Yeah, that's right there where mine is too.
We'll see if it goes.
There you go. Or hey, if any of our listeners wants to do that, I can guarantee you we will definitely call out the article on the podcast. So go really deep in it. We can talk and share your experiences. Might even be able to get you on the show and talk about it. So it'd be interesting.
That would be really cool. I have got another piece of news. The Azure Stack Technical Preview 2 had some new capabilities added for Azure PaaS services. So Azure Stack is obviously the ability to run bits of Azure on-prem in your own data center or what have you. They have added the ability to add Azure App Service, so including web apps, API apps, and mobile apps, updated versions of SQL and MySQL databases as well into the Technical Preview 2 of Azure Stack. So you can go get the update for that. Play around with those new capabilities. If you want to do Azure, but your company's not cool with the cloud, then Azure Stack might be an option as well. It's kind of hard to call it Azure, really. You're running a little bit of your own stuff, right? But a little bit of it on your own hardware and so forth. But yeah, that gives you access to a few new capabilities on the PaaS side of Azure that your apps might take advantage of and might make it a little easier moving to Azure Stack.
Yep. Agreed. Another one that we have here that was I found interesting was an article about continuous integration and deployment to the Azure Container Service. Oh, sorry, that's not what I meant. I meant to talk about something else. I'll let you do that one. The continuous delivery with containers using the Visual Studio Team Services and Docker to build and deploy ASP.NET Core for Linux. So this is a blog post, a series of posts by a guy named Dr. Graham Smith, who is a research scientist and is showing using Visual Studio Team Services and how he's set up to do continuous integration, continuous build stuff for Azure containers. So
nice.
I know we've got another little bit of news here. We may have a couple picks here at the end of the show, but if we do that, why don't we cut for just a second, do another word from one of our sponsors, and we'll be right back. The Microsoft Cloud Show is sponsored by Valid.nl. Valid's motto is stay ahead. Its mission is to enable its customers to excel in their business through the innovative use of IT. Valid is always on the lookout for new colleagues. Are you interested in all things happening in Azure, whether in infrastructure, SQL Server, Office 365, BI, SharePoint, or .NET? Look them up on valid.nl. All right, so we're back. CJ, you got any more news for us?
Yeah, so Azure came out with an announcement saying continuous integration and deployment to the Azure Container Service. So we've talked about ACS on the show a few times with Ross Gardler, Scott Guthrie, and so forth. But in a nutshell, ACS is a great way to spin up either a Mesosphere cluster, DCOS cluster, Swarm cluster, Kubernetes cluster, for want of a better word, up in Azure and run your containers on them. And so those are orchestration engines to help you run and deploy and manage your application. And so Azure came out with a blog post saying continuous integration and deployment to Azure Container Service. So in a nutshell, this just makes it a whole bunch easier when you're going and building your containers or building your application and containerizing them to integrate them into your CI/CD pipeline out to ACS through things like VSTS, Visual Studio Team Services, to be able to build those containers, run any tests on them, tag them, and so forth, drop them into the Azure Container Registry. So that's kind of the equivalent of Docker Hub, but inside of Azure, your own private container registry, and then deploy them out to ACS in a nice, smooth and easy to manage pipeline. So I guess this was all possible before with a whole bunch of heavy lifting and a bit of scripting. But what they're doing is kind of stitching everything together in a nice, easy to manage way so that all the tooling is nice end to end.
So I got a question for you. I mean, you guys are Hyperfish, you're all containers, and I know you use a series of different services to go host and deploy and everything. With the news that we've seen come out of Azure and Microsoft over the last month or so, between continuous integration, rolling out your new images out to where they're being hosted, ACS now supporting Kubernetes, are all these things, and I know you guys use a lot of different services from the Docker Cloud to Travis and a couple of the build tools. Is what Microsoft what they've offered to you, is it enough to get you guys to at least look at what they've done and say, hey, maybe it makes sense to kind of consolidate everything under one hat? Or, I mean, I'm not asking you, are you guys going to do it, but is it enough to get your attention to say, hey, this is viable?
Yeah, definitely. I sort of ummed about that because I think it's almost too much for us. I know that might sound really strange, but so ACS is a pretty big bite to take and chew, right? You've got to run a Kubernetes cluster or a Swarm cluster or a DCOS cluster and have somebody on staff that knows how to keep that thing running, right? And an ops person to run it. Azure's great at spinning it up, but you still got to manage that and run it. It's not totally hands-free. At the moment, we use Docker Cloud for orchestration and management of our containers into cluster in Azure, and that takes a lot of our ops requirements away. Like, we don't have an ops person, right? We run it, the engineering and dev team run it. Maybe one day we'd move to it. We certainly could. There's definitely no technical limitations there. But it's more of a, if it ain't broke, don't fix it at this point. We know our infrastructure really well. It runs really smoothly. We have very little issues with it right now. And so I think we're in a kind of wait and see approach on this for the time being. Our tools work great end to end at the moment. We know them inside out and back to front. Certainly something we could move to, and we may pick up pieces of it, but everything's working pretty well for us at the moment. Actually, Docker Cloud is an interesting one because they are doing a lot of work with Azure directly, with Docker for Azure, which is in preview right now, which will allow you to very straightforwardly, either in AWS or in Azure, use the Docker tools to spin up a Swarm cluster, either in AWS or in Azure. And that is sort of a next step for us versus going to ACS, because it's a little bit less of a bite to chew on at the moment for us.
Yeah, it's kind of still I played a little bit about with the private preview for Azure for Docker Cloud. Or private preview Docker for Azure. Yeah, and I know that is going to eventually become part of the cloud, at least what they were saying as part of in the support groups, the support forums. So, I mean, it's kind of the best of both worlds, right? You're letting someone else be the management of that cluster. Of course, you're using Swarm to do the cluster, so you have to buy into Swarm. But if you wanted to use something like DCOS or you wanted to use Kubernetes, that's obviously something you'd have to consider. But
yeah, Kubernetes is really interesting to me. I need to learn more about it before it. If we were having to scale much, much, much faster and things like that, then honestly, I'd be looking at Kubernetes a whole bunch more than Swarm right now. There was a great article about, I think it was up on Hacker News. This guy wrote up what are the problems with Docker? And one of the problems he sort of brought up was like, it's constantly churning and changing. There's lots of things happening. And he also pointed out that Kubernetes is really the only implementation of an orchestration environment, management environment, and running your containers where they've sort of smoothed out all of the weird inconsistencies between all the parts, and it works, and it's a great implementation of that. So I think we'd look at something like that versus Swarm and ACS, for example. We'd probably go to the Kubernetes route if we were going to go bite off something like ACS.
That's interesting. I was just curious to see, what somebody who's actually using it in production, what you guys were thinking. But
yeah, we have, like I said, there's that age-old saying if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And we'd have to make pretty small steps to really warrant the effort to move to something else.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, it's switching over just for technology's sake. I mean, you're a startup, you're a small business. Goal is to get customers and stuff like that. So, does it actually add to the bottom line? It's a hard decision to kind of make the jump there. But I mean, on the tech side, that's why I was asking, are you guys going to do it? It was more like, is it at least interesting enough to at least go take a look at what they're doing? So,
oh, definitely no harm in taking a look and playing around with it, spinning up a cluster, building some sample apps and deploying them, see how it all works and see how it could fit into your tool chain.
Cool. Well, yeah, I've got I don't know if we have any other news here. I think we're all fresh out of our news.
I think we're all done.
I've got a couple picks here. You have picks this week?
Not really, no.
I have one that I was going to say that we could cherry pick, and I could definitely use it for you. But I have two. I haven't shared one of these with you. The other one I'm sure you know about. But yesterday, the White House. Okay, you go ahead and you do it. You do it. I've got another one.
I got commentary on this. You go for it.
Okay, so yesterday, the President Obama sat down and had a presentation for recent selectors or recipients of what's called the Presidential Medal of Freedom. So for those of you who aren't familiar with this is the highest civilian award in the United States. It's awarded to those who have made an especially meritorious contribution to the security or the national interests of the United States, to world peace, or to culture or other significant public and private endeavors. This one is special, and I think a lot of people don't know who this is. Space geeks probably do. but there is a woman by the name of Margaret Hamilton, and she was the director of the group that oversaw and created the software to do all the flight guidance program on the Apollo program. There's a really cool picture of her standing there when she was in charge of it, and the source code is all printed out and stacked up next to her. And she's about an inch or two taller than all the source code she's got listed there. But I read a really cool thing about this. There's a really good link on her wiki page, or on the Wikipedia page for her. People who you've probably seen, reenactments of the Apollo 11 of them landing on the moon, and you saw things where the software, they were getting those master program alarms that were popping up, and the Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin kept asking, is this okay? Is this okay? And they came back and said, same type of alarm. Don't worry about it. It's not important. What her team had done is they were smart enough to, God, I wish I had this on my Mac. They were smart enough to write something into the program that could tell when there were critical things that needed to be done and then less critical things needed to be done. When the computer was getting inputs to deal with critical things, but it was being overloaded, then it was smart enough to prioritize the critical things first, drop the lower prioritized things, and say, hey, look, we can't do this. We got stuff that's more important to do. And the program alarm was simply saying, hey, we're dropping some tasks that we just don't have time to do, that are not important right now. And they asked her about it, why are you getting these program alarms there? And she said, look, we knew that of all the work that was being done, we had one shot to get this right. And there was no live troubleshooting or whatever. This was, the computer had to work, and we have one shot to do it. And they were smart enough to build it in. So I found it really cool that in an industry that was so dominated by men, it's awesome that a woman was in charge of this.
Yeah. I watched that award ceremony yesterday, and there was an incredible lineup of people, right? And really, really well-known people like Michael Jordan and
the hero of Space Jam.
Yeah, and Bill Gates, for goodness sake, right? Yeah. And, I didn't watch it for them. I watched it to go see Margaret Hamilton accept her award. And it was incredible. I don't know. It's my two favorite passions in life is software and space stuff. And to see somebody be awarded for putting software and people on the moon is just amazing. Not to mention all the other things she's done for women in software and things like that. But also, I've got a pick from the exact same award ceremony, Grace Hopper, who was the other woman who was awarded posthumously, who was also in the software field. And she worked in the Navy for many, many years, and probably is most famous for inventing the first compiler, and was a big proponent of this idea that you could build programming languages that then compiled down into machine code and ran, that were independent of the machine that they ran on. She worked on things like COBOL and stuff like that, UNIVAC, those sorts of machines. And she was also awarded the medal as well, Presidential Medal of Freedom, yesterday, which was really cool to see. So in one award ceremony, we had probably not the most famous, certainly one or two of the most famous women in technology be awarded these medals. And that's pretty impressive. That's really amazing. They were who I watched this for, not Bill or Michael Jordan or Tom Hanks or the other people that were there. Yeah, seeing people like this, any of the public that were watching that were probably like, what? Who are these people? I don't know them. They've toiled away in private and out of the spotlight for decades to get us places like the moon and advances in computer science and things. And it was incredible, really impressive. Hey, I heard just on Margaret Hamilton, we talked about getting the Apollo guidance computer code into GitHub the other day. We talked about it on the show a little bit. Apparently there's a really funny issue thread on that now where somebody said, hey, maybe we could recreate the GitHub commit history of how the software was written in GitHub. And we could even backdate it to the correct dates that the code was committed. And somebody replied and said, that's not possible. And they were like, why not? And they said, because this was written before Unix time started.
Oh, wow. Yeah. In the 60s.
Before Epoch, right? Before
January 1st, 1970?
Yeah. Apparently that's not going to work because those dates don't exist.
That is so cool. That is so cool. Yeah, and you mentioned too, another one of the awardees, it was not for technology, which I thought was interesting, but Bill and Melinda Gates for their work with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Yep. there were actually quite a few really interesting people that were awarded. You should definitely go take a look at the list. Really fascinating. Diana Ross, for example, was there as well, and there was some incredible
I haven't had a chance to watch the video of Margaret Hamilton or Grace Hopper. I did get to watch the one. I haven't found the clips of like the specific ones. There's some that I'm just like, Tom Hanks, good actor, but that's not moving me. I'd like to go back and find the one with Bill. I'd like to find Bill and Melinda Gates, find the one with Grace Hopper and Margaret Hamilton. The one that I did watch, though, that was really moving was Ellen DeGeneres. I thought that was phenomenal. But
amazing.
So that happened yesterday on November the 22nd. I have another pick, though, that you shared a book that you had read recently, I think Extreme Leadership. I've got one that you can get on Audible, you can get it on your Kindle, you can get it on hardcover. I think you're going to love it. I am sucked in. I parked the car the other day and actually sat there and let a chapter finish. I was just so sucked in. The title of the book is called Into the Black, The Extraordinary Untold Story of the First Flight of the Space Shuttle Columbia and the Astronauts Who Flew Her. Have you read this?
Yes, I haven't read it, but it's on my list. Spence Harbar put me onto this, actually.
He did the same for me, too.
And it's on my to-do.
It is.
Sure.
It's awesome. I just got through the part when they're going back and forth. I'm at the part where they're designing the systems and everything, and they're talking about how much memory they're going to need to go through and run this. And do you know the entire Space Shuttle Columbia ran on 700K of memory? Actually ran on less than that because the contractor said they were only going to need 128. So the astronauts were going back and forth. Crippen and John Young were the two that were kind of like the liaisons between the manufacturer or the contractors and the systems integrators and IBM and the astronauts. And they were adamant that they had visualization and alerts for a lot of the different sensors and stuff that were on the orbiter. And they came to find out that the software that was being written to show them like visualizations of all the stuff that was going on, and how I've always wondered this, you go back and look and say, we see the visualizations, like why didn't anybody ever have those visualizations when you have things that were bad and stuff like that instead of just showing numbers on the screen? It's because all that stuff took up a lot of memory. And so they went back and they said, look, we had to cut all these different, things we were doing because it was going to just be so much, it's going to take up so much memory for the software to be able to show the visualizations and alerts and everything when things were going on, that we just had to basically just show numbers on the screen, and astronauts had to be trained for when they were inside and outside of parameters. And it really is. I just got to the point where they are about to fly the Enterprise for the very first time to release it off the back of the 747 and glide it down and see what it looks like. But it was just, it's an awesome story. I'm probably 30% into it. You'll love it. You can't put it down.
Yeah. That sounds really good. That's pretty interesting that they were so heavily involved because they were the two that flew STS-1. So you'd hope they were kind of involved. They're putting their life on the line for the first flight.
Yeah, so talk about pucker factor.
Major.
Yeah.
Yeah, major. And apparently, we can get into this for hours. But that was, STS-1 was the first time the entire stack had been put together and flown, was the first flight. And imagine that. Hope it all comes together on the day. Turns out it did, but yeah. It
is really impressive. I mean, it's just hearing the story about how it all kind of came together and how Crippen and Young were trying to get to the moon, and they kind of hopped around a couple different places and the different spy satellites that were going on at the same time, and the internal battles between NASA and the Air Force and the military and the White House, and it's the politics around it, the policy around it, red tape. It's a great story. It's a really good story.
So that's Into the Black, yeah?
Into the Black. There's a couple different articles or a couple different titles that are called Into the Black. The one that I found, I'll put it in the show notes. It's by a guy who wrote, his name is Roland White. It was published in April 19th of this year, of 2016. Into the Black, the extraordinary untold story of the first flight of the Space Shuttle Columbia and the astronauts who flew her. It's got a picture of Columbia lifting off and clearing the pad on the cover.
Cool. I will absolutely get that loaded for my vacation to Mexico.
Yeah, let's just rub it in, jerk.
Yeah. Nice.
All good. Well, hey man, we got to we got to do another Space Geek Out coming up. We should do a talk on some of the networking stuff in the Microsoft Global Network too. I learned a ton of stuff of this trip that I just did to Japan and Australia. I was teaching Express Route for Office 365, so my mind blew. I know I was texting you a little bit during one of the deliveries of the guy before me talking about the Azure side. So, man, the Microsoft Global Network, second biggest network in the world.
Yeah, that'd be behind the internet?
Behind the internet.
Yeah, wow.
It's really impressive. It's really impressive.
I sat through some internal talks about it, a long time ago, and I'm sure it's developed a lot further since then. But, yeah, we should definitely yap about that.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Anyway, hey, nice. We've yapped on enough about this one. We don't want to go too much longer. So what do you say we call it and tell everybody? I know we've already done it's by the time you listen to this, it'll already be over with this. But to everybody in the United States, happy Thanksgiving.
Absolutely.
Special for you this year, huh? Because it's your citizens now.
Exactly. Yeah. It's it feels a little different.
You're allowed to eat turkey now?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Hey, one thing before we go, we've got a 5-star review I just want to read out from Albert. I just heard about this on the Office 365 Developer Podcast. I plan to binge listen to 20 hours this weekend. I hope to listen to all the past episodes before the start of September. So this is from July. I think the series is great. I heard Andrew in Atlanta at SharePoint Saturday. I used to buy his books, but there does not seem to be as many technology books anymore. I guess Borders and Barnes and Noble was so 90s and 2000s. Hey, well, Albert, we talked a little bit about AC's new venture. So instead of books, you're going to get videos instead.
Exactly. Be a whole lot easier for you to get to, and it won't weigh nearly as much.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's funny because I saw someone else on Twitter. So thank you very much for the 5-star review, Albert. I really appreciate it. I saw somebody on Twitter jump on a couple weeks ago or last week and said, this podcast is absolutely fantastic, said some really great things about it. Absolutely love it. I'm like, hey, sweet. So what's your favorite episode? And they said, well, I've only listened to episode 164 and 165, but the Scott Goo episode was awesome. I'm like, well, yeah, it's going to be kind of hard to top that interview.
The only way is down, buddy. Nice.
Anyway, cool.
All right. Have a good one.
Yeah, man. You too. Good talking to you again. Did you like this episode? Send us a tweet about it and drop us a 5-star review in iTunes. Word-of-mouth recommendations are the most effective ways for us to grow the show. We'd really appreciate it. If you have a question for us, go to microsoftcloudshow.com/questions, where you can submit it as text or record it as a WAV or an MP3 and provide a link so that we can play your question on the show. Our theme music is an excerpt from Evaporated Air by Monk Turner, used under Creative Commons. You can subscribe to us in iTunes and the Google Play Store by searching for Microsoft Cloud Show or via RSS at microsoftcloudshow.com, where you'll also find show notes of each episode. You can also find us on Facebook, searching for Microsoft Cloud Show, or on Twitter at MS Cloud Show. And finally, sign up to our mailing list by heading to our website and entering your email to interact with us, participate in upcoming interviews, and other cool stuff. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.